I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we take your book and we chop it into bits and pieces and recite those bits and pieces back in the way that we think they make the most sense. And if you want them in the order that they're in the book, assuming that that makes more sense, well, go read it. Have fun. Enjoy your life. But if you like to have a chat with us instead, well, you're in the right spot because here we're chatting.
You guys, I am so flippin' excited to announce that we are going back on tour, and it is not a regular tour. It's a fun tour.
It is the Memoir Madness Tournament of Champions. We are going to be pitting our memoirists against each other in, that's right, a tournament of champions.
We will be picking the winner in New York City, but until we get there, we're going to have everyone duke it out at different rounds in your city, maybe.
We are going to be headed to Philly, DC, San Francisco, Chicago, Toronto, London, Dublin, and then finally, we will be having the Championship of Champions
in Brooklyn.
Ever heard of it? Tickets go on sale February 4th. That's right now. If you're listening to this the moment it drops at 10 a.m. for Patreon subscribers only. So Patreon subscribers get to subscribe first. Head over to the Patreon if you want that chance. And they will be going on sale for everybody across the whole wide world February 6th.
We cannot wait to see you there. We're so excited for you guys to follow along at home and see which of the memoirists is going to be in your city as they, what's the word for like getting through it, as they like push on into the tournament.
That's what they say in sports, push on into the tournament.
Yeah, which team will push on to the next round?
Oh my God, do you know what February 6th is? It's me and Bug's anniversary. What a good me and Bug's anniversary gift to get to you and yours. Tour tickets.
Bug is actually going to hate that you're leaving.
Claire, if you were to write a memoir, what would you title your chapter about last week?
Well, I've got questions.
Okay.
If you're allergic to your skincare, can you still use it? Is it still working even if it just mildly upsets your face in a swollen capacity? If it's causing swelling, is that good or bad? Because I have heard about purposeful harm to the head. That's actually a big beauty hack.
Yeah. Peel your face, zap your face.
Sometimes you take a laser to the dome.
Sometimes you stick some needles in it. Those needles are full of all kinds of chemicals. And then afterwards, you're beautiful.
Yeah, you burn yourself into submission. Like kind of a trial by fire, death by fire, kill your older self.
Like a phoenix rising from the ashes. First, you have to burn.
And you know what I mean? Like to work out, you're often ripping up, doing micro tears in your muscles, and that's actually quite good for them. Mm-hmm. So be working towards failure to rip up all your muscles.
They call it getting shredded.
Yeah. They don't call it getting patched up delicately.
They don't call it no harm, no foul.
Yeah, they call it foul, 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 harm, harm, harm. Go, go, go. As the old saying goes, no pain, no gain. Beauty hurts.
Those are two very popular sayings, actually.
So I come to you, and I guess by the time this episode comes out, my face will be on the floor, or it'll be tighter than a penguin wing.
Do penguins have rather tight wings?
They're around water constantly, and never does the water get in.
Do they swim?
Yeah, of course. How do you think they eat fish?
I don't know. I thought the fish came to them.
Did you not see much of the penguins?
Fish out of water, you know?
God, there's so many phrases out there. And it's not clarifying anything. I'm not cleared up on anything.
You know, I never did see March of the Penguins.
Okay, I do think that that's actually going to become a Christmas tradition for us.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering, do I keep hurting myself towards some end?
Okay, so you're allergic to your serum.
But I've been using it diligently because it's quite expensive.
Right.
And so I think I'm so close to actually just getting to the end of it. My point is this not life? Is life not small little lacerations to like no true end? We'll die anyway. It hurts and it hurts and it hurts until what? I mean, is that not Catholicism?
Yeah, and I know how much you stick by your Catholic beliefs.
Anyway, that's what I've been knocking around. That's been the hockey puck in this rink. That's the sound of the puck being hit back and forth.
Up here?
In the noggin.
Nothing but air hockey.
Don't answer this, by the way. I want to figure it out for myself. Don't tell me what the answer is. I'm talking to the listeners.
Oh.
I know you'll feel compelled to say, Claire, don't do that. But I want to learn a lesson.
No, you don't.
2025 is my year of consequence. I'm really into consequences and reaping what I sow.
In the never learned a lesson disease freaking epidemic, we've got patients 0 and 1 right over here.
And 2025, I plan to change that. I'm going to learn something.
Okay, a cure. A cure is afoot.
An inoculation, if you will, that I may or may not be allergic to. I'll take it anyway. Okay, sorry, we've really gotten off topic here.
What are we talking? Okay,
I don't know. Ashley,
ask me about my week.
Yeah, I will. Can you dial it back in? Whatever you're going to say, try to make it streamlined because I've used up all the goof, I think. Ashley, tell me about your week, please, in a memoir style.
Okay, I think this might be the week that I have to reintroduce myself to like proper hardwired alarm clocks.
Where are you going to put it? Right next to your bed?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, what about far away from your bed?
Maybe far away from
What
my
happened
bed.
to Bug? The original hardwire.
Okay, so here's the thing with Bug and her.
Did I put my finger on the problem? Exactly.
One job. She has one day-to-day task. Okay, everything else is handled for her. Everything else, I feed her. I take her on walks. I bathe her. Like, she does not have to do anything other than wake me up. And normally she's very diligent about wake up times because that's when she eats. But the thing that I always forget to account for is how much she hates to be chilly. And so when she is...
Me and Bug are so similar.
When she is snoogled into her bed in the wintertime and the idea of waking up means like waking up, having to go on a walk. It's cold outside. She's going to have to wear a jacket. She doesn't like wearing clothes, but she knows she needs them in the winter. Like, she just doesn't want to do it. She would rather just dig down deeper into her snoogliest self. And the problem is that when nothing is blaring in my ears and my beautiful dog is just being like a 10 out of 10 snuggler, and then also it's cold outside, what am I going to be like? Absolutely not. I have to lay down the law. I'm not stronger than anybody. And so we've been sleeping. I mean, we've been waking up at 9:30.
That's crazy. Bug eats at 7:15 or something.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is she losing weight rapidly?
I mean, she's still eating the same amount of food.
Oh, okay.
At like 9, I'll be like, oh God, we have to wake up. And then I'll suggest eating. And she'll act like she's been starved for months. And I'm like, well, you didn't even ask. You didn't even tell me that you wanted anything. So I've been sleeping.
Do you want my
the
my hat?
You hate?
No, I don't hate it if they want to do a sponsorship.
I'd rather find one that works or one that is ready to prove to me that they work via sponsorship. Anyway, should we get into this week's book?
I would love to.
So this week we are reading Bits and Pieces, My Mother, My Brother, and Me by Whoopi Goldberg. We have actually tried to cover another Whoopi Goldberg book before. It was much more random thoughts and tangents. And so we ended up just kind of putting it back on the shelf. This one promised to be a bit more memoir-like, and it was. It was memoir adjacent. It's also very tangenty. It's interesting how she tells all these stories from her life, and it feels like they could be all stories from different people's lives. Like, they don't really connect to me as one life.
This is like not entirely relevant, but we've talked about this on the Patreon. I read this essay by David Foster Wallace about this female tennis player that he like was in love with growing up, and reading her memoir and how disappointed he was in it because it felt like so cliche and unnuanced and without depth. And he was thinking like, why is it that so many athlete memoirs are like this? Like, why do they all operate with all of these cliches? And he kind of comes to this conclusion that maybe that's what it takes to be an incredible athlete and be great at something, is that like, unfortunately, they are people who can, for better or for worse, for memoir readers, they are people who can live in these cliches of like, you just have to want it the most. Just get out there and give it your all and operate in these like extremes. And it just isn't deeper than that. Like, to be great, you have to be able to go out and kind of clear your mind and just do your best. And I kind of feel that that works for Whoopi's book. I was so blown away by what an incredible career she's had and who she is and what she's accomplished, more so than I realized. Like, I've always known Whoopi Goldberg to just be like this ever-present Hollywood A-lister, but I didn't realize how talented she was. I guess I know she EGOT'd, but I never really internalized her acting talent because I think of her as a host of The View and more a personality. I also think of her as comedic, which is funny because she has some very serious roles. But I think what has made Whoopi strong as a success in Hollywood is also what makes this book kind of odd.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've noticed this a lot in some of the more talented actors we've covered. They are very compartmentalized.
Yes, it feels like there's a type of person who's successful. And I'm not going to say this is all successful people. I don't think it's even all successful creative people, but there's a type of person who is able to be successful and overcome obstacles because to them, it is simply a matter of pick yourself up and try again, work a little harder, ask somebody else. And because they're able to just like push themselves forward in that kind of, well, there's nothing else to do but to do it and try again, they're able to succeed where a lot of people fail or a lot of people are held back systemically. But then when they go to tell the story, it's like, well, how'd you do it? And she's like, I don't know. You pick yourself up and you do it. And you go, okay.
And I think there's also this vessel quality to them where they're like in this mode, I think writing your memoir to be released to the public, it feels very professional mode. And so she's telling kind of stories that she's comfortable revealing to the public, which means she's in actor mode, which is sort of a vessel. And the reason some of these people we've covered who write more vessel-y type memoirs are so talented is because they can just be like completely filled by a character. They can be filled by a moment. They can be filled by these things that sort of exist in one single point in time. It like takes a lot more to connect those moments because they're not doing it on purpose, you know?
100%. So to the introduction, which is always a promising start when a memoirist comes forth going, this is not the truth. There is no such thing. This is my best shot at it. There's something about when a writer head on acknowledges that this is a version of their understanding of themselves, and that can't be counted on for an objective truth. That gives me promise for their sense of self-awareness. Probably none of us had the childhoods we think we had. We only have our individual memories of what we believe happened. You can talk to siblings born 2 years apart and they will give you different perspectives on the same event or experience in their childhood. So what's that supposed to mean? We can't trust our memories? You know, yeah, that's exactly what it means.
So Whoopi Goldberg was raised by her mother and she had an older brother 5 years older than her. And in 2010, her mom died very suddenly. And then her older brother died very suddenly 5 years later. So they'd remained very close throughout their entire lives. It was really just her brother, and her mom a lot. And so to lose both of them fairly close together and both very suddenly really kind of sent her into a tailspin.
She also has this incredibly tight family unit. Her brother, her mom, they were tight till the day they died. They lived together almost their entire lives. They did not receive a lot of support from extended family. And so it was just like the three of them. And I think when they passed away, Whoopi really felt deeply unmoored.
So her mom's name was Emma Johnson.
Whoopi Goldberg herself was born Karen Johnson, spelled Caryn, which I think is important because her older brother is Clyde, Clyde. And I feel that there was a trend that Miss Emma wanted us to acknowledge.
So Clyde was 6 when Whoopi, then Karen, was born. And her mom has this way about not answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
She would ask her mom how old she was, and her mom would say, "Why do you want to know?" Whoopi would say, "Well, it's your birthday, so how old are you?" And her mom would say, "Why does it matter?" And her mom would just say, "I'm old enough to be your mother." There are a lot of pieces of information that she just never got from her mom because her mom would be like, "That's not an important question."
Yeah, her mom was a big believer in like, that's not children's business. And then it seems like until the day she died, she kept most things close to the vest. She had a real life motto of, it doesn't matter what you've been dealt, it doesn't matter what your past has been. You've got to get done what you've got to get done. And so there's nothing to do but get up and do it. And we'll talk later about how effective of a life motto that is.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, very.
And in other ways, not at all.
Yeah.
So Whoopi was born November 13th, 1955, and was raised by her mother with her brother in the projects in Chelsea on 26th and 10th. She said we had 2,400 close neighbors, lots of folks of every color, religion, language, and culture, all packed into a couple of city blocks.
I lived among a whole lot of people barely getting by. Somehow my mom made my brother and me feel like we lived at the entrance of a big, interesting world in which we could do anything we wanted to do.
From as early on as I remember, my mom would say to me, listen, the confines of this neighborhood do not represent the confines of your life. You can go and do and be whatever you want, but whatever you choose, be yourself.
And her mom did create this massive world for them. They were in Manhattan, of course, so there was access to a lot of art and culture. They would really look for the free days at the museums. They would go to the park. They would see all these exhibits.
Go to lectures. I mean, they saw JFK speak.
But her mom would also save up for these really incredible cultural experiences Like seeing the ballet, seeing
the Rockettes, the Ice Capades. They saw the Beatles at Shea Stadium. I do want to say, she goes on later to say, Mom, how did we do all that? And her mom would go, what do you mean? What do you mean? She go, like, how were you able to get us in? And she said, it doesn't matter. Like, when you say save up, I do wonder if there's a backstory there.
Yeah.
It seems like most of Whoopi's mom's life is a mystery to Whoopi to this day. And we'll find out later that,
I mean, it's a mystery to everybody.
It's a mystery to her mom herself. And so I do wonder if there was something Whoopi as a child did not understand and then as an adult didn't want to like think about going on. Because there was a lot of unanswerable questions. Because she says we lived paycheck to paycheck and oftentimes we were like just scraping to get by. But yet she would give us these amazing Christmases and take us to these incredible events. Even logistic things like every Christmas, her mom would decorate the house a little bit more every day while the kids were at school because she worked the night shift. And during the year, she says, I could never find where she stashed all of this Christmas stuff because we had a small apartment. And yet she had boxes and boxes of Christmas decor and I didn't know where they were hidden. I could never find them. And then whenever she asks her mom, even as an adult, her mom's like, it doesn't matter. It was magic. Just believe me. And I do wonder what the magic was.
Yeah, like stuff must have come from somewhere. Anyway, so they would do a lot around New York City. And her mom, this one I found really funny. Her mom had a lot of sayings, a lot of philosophies, one of them being, again, you just had to keep moving forward. But she did say when you were wallowing or moping or like pouting about something, she said there wasn't room for complaining when I was growing up. My mother would say, if you're going to feel bad today, then make it big. Lie on the couch and throw your wrist across your forehead and sigh loudly so we all know what's going on for you. That way we can step back and say, okay, that's what she's doing now. Go ahead, get it over with. I'll wait.
My mother was clear. I have to be practical. I have 2 kids. I can't spend a lot of time crying about what I don't have. I have to figure out what I do have and go from there. That was her approach. She didn't complain or explain. However, my mother laughed. And as a kid, they just had so much fun. I mean, she says, like, I never felt poor. I just, like, had the most magical childhood. I feel like we got to do everything and experience everything. Her older brother, even though he was 6 years older, always let Whoopi come play with him and his friends. And she said most 12-year-old boys, like, that's a big difference to be 12 and 6. Most 12-year-old boys don't want their 6-year-old sister coming with, but he always included her. And there was just a very tight-knit family.
She flashes forward to the day she found out her mom passed. Her brother called her to say, I just found her. I'd gone out for an errand and I came back and she was gone. And she happened to be doing a performance of Sister Act on the West End with Maggie Smith, Dame.
I think Maggie Smith was just there to watch.
Oh my God, yeah. Maggie Smith and her friends were at the show that night just to see me. And Maggie Smith, really? I was like, whoa, Maggie Smith stan over here. She just sat and like listened to Whoopi Goldberg talk about her mom until it was time for her to go to the airport and get home to say her goodbyes. It's a really lovely thing to do for someone.
Yeah. Clyde and I agreed to pull the plug together, turning off life support.
This, I respect that she followed her mom's wishes, but if she hadn't, I wouldn't have thought that she was like defying her mom's wishes.
Yeah.
Her mom did not want a funeral or a celebration of life or any kind of event because she hated inconveniencing people. So she didn't want people to cancel their plans for a day to come celebrate her. She didn't want to be buried anywhere that people would go visit. Her official wishes were just put me in the microwave.
Memorials are for other people, not the dead person. It's not like I care anyway. I'm not there. So if you don't mind, I'd rather not. I will say, if you're not there, let people.
I will say that's the thing, is they're not for the dead person. They're for the people who are still alive. And some people in their process of mourning actually really need that moment. But it's fine.
So they actually ended up spreading the ashes at Disneyland because Whoopi, once she got success, was able to take her mom to Disneyland. And it was such a magical moment for them. And the mother was like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to do this for you. And she goes, it doesn't matter who's doing it for who. What matters is that we're here. And they had so much fun. And of course, that's where they wanted to bury her. Turns out it's incredibly illegal to do that at Disney. And they now have security guards like on the lookout. Because of course, a lot of Disney adults want to be buried at Disney.
My mother held her cards close to the vest. I didn't know much about her childhood until I was in my 40s. So her mom grew up in Harlem. She was an only child, but she had a cousin that was like a sister. There's just like not a ton of information about her mom.
Which is too bad because
she does seem really interesting.
I need to know how she became the woman she was. I'm so interested in her like life's philosophy and the kind of person she ended up being. But basically, Emma's mom, Emma is Whoopi's mother. So Emma's mother was a single mom. The father had left and remarried the heir to an ice cream store. And when they had their own family, Emma always felt very uninvited. Like she would get to go, but she said the energy was different. She wasn't really included in that new family. So she just kind of like let it go.
Later, when Emma married Whoopi's father, They actually never got divorced. His name was Robert Johnson. They were together until he died, but he was gay. And Whoopi's very compassionate about how hard it must have been to be a gay Black man in the 60s, but he also wasn't present. So they were together for a little bit, and then he just couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't live this fake version of his life. And so he left, but like they kind of stayed in touch. She says that she felt that Robert was always the love of Emma's life. But I will say, I don't know, you don't have to like be together to just still show up sometimes.
I would only see him occasionally. He would have Clyde for a weekend once in a while. He definitely had more to say and do with his son than his daughter. Come to think of it, neither one of my parents ever filed for divorce. I do remember asking about my father. Ma, why doesn't he like me? She would say, of course he likes you, but he is who he is, and I can't answer that question. The next time you see him, you must ask him yourself. One of my mom's pet peeves is when people wouldn't be direct about something. She says, Mom, when did you know he was gay? And she said, I never thought about it. What that meant coming from my mom was, I know, but I'm not talking about it, and this conversation is now done. It was another mystery, and it was going to stay a mystery. So Whoopi was a guest on that show, Who Do You Think You Are? And found out about her great-great-grandparents. And her mom never even watched the show. She goes, I don't want to let the past bog me down. It doesn't matter what they did. Imagine having a TV show about your parents, then you're like, I won't watch it.
Yeah.
If I don't know, then I don't need to know.
The thing Whoopi knew for sure about her mom is that her mom loved her unconditionally. And she says that she doesn't think that there will ever be anyone on earth who loves her as much as she did.
She talked about growing up in the projects in Manhattan and how for her it was kind of like this great childhood. She had all these neighbors, all the kids would play at the playground. She said everybody's mom was like looking out the window so you couldn't get in trouble. And if you did something wrong, by the time you got to your own apartment, your mom had already heard. They would ask for a quarter. Sometimes her mom would drop it down and sometimes she'd say, well, look at all that money in the corner, go take it. And what she was talking about was like the recycling. She could go take the cans to get a nickel back and they would use that money for candy and try to feed the kids at the playground.
And then every now and then her mom would take them on these just magical surprise adventures to Coney Island and they would ride the rides and get a treat and have a hot dog. And that sounds awesome.
I know. I can't wait to go this summer. Every year they would go to the Statue of Liberty. And she said it was really important. She said she would climb up to the top of the statue and look at all of Manhattan and just see what was possible.
This chapter, I think the details aren't that important, but it's just kind of about how she's always been different and a bit eccentric. She doesn't sleep. She says she gets 4 hours of sleep a night and that is fine.
That's how she's been as a kid.
She's also an insanely picky eater. One time her and her mom got into this insane standoff where her mom tried to make her eat eggs. And she refused to eat eggs. And then she came home for lunch and her mom was still trying to make her eat the same eggs. She came home for dinner. Her mom was still trying to make her eat eggs. She ended up going to sleep with no food all day, except for some candy she had under her bed. But the next day, her mom just kind of backed down and was like, you know what? You have to just trust that sometimes kids just want what they want, I guess. If she's going to be this stubborn about it, there's no reason to make Whoopi Goldberg eat eggs. And to this day, she says she's never had eggs.
Good for her.
I mean, that is a staunch resistance.
My mother was into expanding her mind and showing us a larger world in any way possible. Education was a very big deal. Since childhood, she had been curious about many different things and loved learning. She was interested in ancient history, music, literature, art, and creative writing. They would go to the New York libraries and they would just be surrounded by books.
They would go to plays. Bill and Cora Bard, who created puppets and marionettes and had their own theater space. It helped me feel a little less weird seeing two adult people who had a whole career in making wooden things move and talk.
She said her mom didn't have a lot of friends in their housing area, that she didn't ever gossip. She was a big, she didn't talk shit about anybody, and that made the other women not like her. And a lot of the women thought that maybe she was going to come steal their husbands or something. My mom just blew that off. She would say, I got 2 kids of my own. Why would I want her man and 4 more of his kids? They would go to MoMA. The 1960s in New York City, there was just so much art, and Whoopi's whole family, they were just taking it all in.
Yeah, they went to the World's Fair in 1964.
They go to the Ice Capades, the Ringling Bros. They loved movies as a family. They would go to every movie. They would watch movies on the Sundays or Saturdays. Televisions would just play movies all day. They would watch all of the movies. They just had so much fun walking around Gimbels and looking at the Christmas lights.
Everything is idyllic, and then with no real warning, we are dropped one of the most insane plot twists I've seen in Celebrity Memoir Book Club book history.
I mean, you have to understand, 5 pages dedicated to the most magic Christmas you have ever heard, where her mom was able to get all the gifts and decorations in. The kids would scour the apartment for all the gifts, and somehow she was able to keep dozens of gifts hidden, and they would save all of their money for months to get their mom a little necklace or something, and they could keep the tree up till January. It was just so beautiful.
I mean, we had 5 pages on the hot dogs at Coney Island, just the wind in your hair while you smile with your mom and your brother. One afternoon, I came home from elementary school and found my mother standing in the hallway looking in the coat closet. Her hair was completely disheveled, sticking out all over her head. Without seeing her face, I knew something was really wrong. She turned around and looked toward the bedrooms. I didn't know what to do. Clyde wasn't home, and I knew I couldn't leave her like this. I watched her as she went over to the oven, turned it on, opened the door, and put her head in there. Whoopi goes running up to find her neighbor. Her neighbor calls the police, and then her mom is taken away in an ambulance, and they don't see her for 2 years.
It'll be all right. It'll be fine, Clyde told me. I could tell by his voice that he didn't really believe it. It wasn't fine. It was the last time I saw my mother for 2 whole years. No one explained to me what had happened. I only knew that she was in the hospital and kids weren't allowed to go. I didn't understand until later that my mother had been sent to Bellevue Hospital for having a nervous breakdown. And then she goes, she'd actually been acting differently for a couple months. I'd wake up in the night to her standing over me. Clyde had to talk her off a ledge a couple times and would find her holding scissors.
She would ask her mom, "Why does your head keep shaking?" And her mom would say, "It's not shaking. I left it alone." She never talked about her feelings. She kept it all contained with a self-sufficient attitude.
Ma solved her problems on her own because she had to. She didn't have any help and she was never comfortable asking anyone for a favor.
And then she says she doesn't know what happened in those 2 years. She knows her mom was at Bellevue and she knows there was various cousins and relatives that came and stayed with them. It all happened somehow, but I don't know how or when. None of the holidays without my mom are in my memory. I don't recall being at school or going to the next grade, but I know I did. Nobody asked me about it. Nobody told me it would be okay or that I'd see my mom again. I mean, this is horrifying.
She has no sense of when it's going to end. These are 2 years that happened when she was 9 years old. So from 9 to the age of 11, she's just living in this apartment with her older brother and random relatives who will come in shifts and take care of them. But of course, not really take care of them, just make sure they're not dead. And then one day, their mom's home. They run to her shouting, "Ma." She hugged us both, but looked like she wasn't sure what was going on.
I thought maybe she didn't like being hugged so much because she'd been in the hospital for so long, but she didn't respond to the hugs at all, even a week later. She would look at me like she was trying to figure out what I wanted and what she was supposed to do for me and Clyde.
This woman in our living room looked like my mom and sounded like my mom, but it wasn't her. She tried to talk to Clyde about it, but Clyde's like, "What are you talking about? Leave it alone." They start having to help their mom get around, show her where the supermarket is, show her how to get laundry done. She seems so out of it. She hates to be hugged. She's no longer loving.
We didn't know at the time why she was so different, but we chalked it up to thinking that people must get kind of standoffish when they've been hospitalized for a long time. Maybe they get tired of folks being up in their face. It made me question if I even remembered who she used to be.
Years later, they're talking about that time. And she said,
about 40 years later.
Yeah, Mom looked at Clyde and then me. "I didn't know who you were when I got home from the hospital. My brother and I were both said the same thing. What? What do you mean? Of course you knew who we were." Then she went on to tell me the story that stunned my brother and me. Afterwards, it all made perfect sense. In the same way a woman couldn't get a bank loan or a credit card on her own in the 1960s, she also couldn't decide on her own health care. Because she was still married to my father, he and my grandfather just got to decide what happened to her after she was taken by the ambulance. These two men, who were barely ever around my mom, approved of her having experimental electroshock therapy. After she talked, I sat there and felt awful for her that she had been sent to a mental hospital and had to stay for 2 years. After all, it might all have been prevented if they had helped her out along the way. All she wanted to do was get some help, and nobody would help her, nobody. And then she came out, and she had had so many brain-altering treatments that she literally could not remember who she was or who these children were or where she was. All of her memories were gone.
But then she wanted to be out of the hospital so badly. She was so excited to now be freed that she didn't tell anyone that she had no memories. She just let them bring her back to her house. She just quietly put all of the pieces of her life back together by inferring from other people's actions.
It seems like some of her memories started to come back, but she had a period in life where she just had no idea who she was. Because she'd been electrocuted almost to death by these men who had fucking abandoned her. Can you imagine not sending life support, but then saying, "Yeah, go get shocked for 2 years"?
Oh, child support.
Child support, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she would ask for money from the dad. The dad didn't send any. And now he's having her just get electrocuted. Okay.
She says for the rest of her life, she never went back to the doctor. She refused to even go to the dentist. And she'd say, "I'm okay with losing a couple teeth. I'm not going."
I mean, her teeth were literally rotting out of her head, and she would never step into a doctor's office, a dentist's office, any kind of medical facility ever again because she had been so horrifically traumatized. And then Clyde and Whoopi, thinking back on the last couple of years, realized she had had a handful of strokes that never went treated because she wouldn't go near a doctor.
And of course, Clyde took it really hard on himself. I should have noticed. And Whoopi's like, "Well, what would you have done? Even if you had said you're having a stroke right now, she wouldn't have gone to the hospital."
And then 5 years later, Clyde died of an aneurysm as well.
Clyde died very fast like that in the same way. I wasn't ready for him to go, but I was still grateful I didn't have to make any choices for him either. Her mom's big fear was being put in a nursing home. And so she's like, I guess the one good thing is because she died so quickly, there was no time to be like, well, who's going to take care of her? Because she was so afraid of doctors, rightfully so. And then just like that, it's never addressed again. The next chapter starts, my mother always knew I'd be in the spotlight one day. And we get the story of Whoopi's birth and how she came out and wasn't crying and was like looking around and finding her light. I'm like, okay. Whoopi had dyslexia. Okay.
Okay, that's so interesting. So Whoopi had dyslexia and it made school really frustrating for her because obviously in that era, I mean, I still don't think kids are being helped in the way they need to be, but she especially wasn't. And so she just had such a hard time in school. She did not understand how other kids were reading. And she learned by listening, and her mom kind of realized that Whoopi was having a hard time reading. So her mom would read to her, would tell her things, they'd go to lectures, and she learned a lot just by listening.
She would remind me, listen, you can do anything you want to do. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. You'll have to figure a couple things out, but you can do that.
Yeah, her mom never made her feel bad for having a hard time with reading.
And she says once she saw that like Whoopi was trying, it just was more difficult for her, and that she wasn't not doing well in school because she wouldn't, it's because she literally couldn't. And her mom just went, okay, this isn't your path. That's fine. She goes into these like stories about, I don't know, being bad as a tween. She didn't pick up her room. Okay, whatever.
That's okay. Another major lesson her mom was very insistent on was letting Whoopi know that she needed to make her own money. She could never rely on someone else to take care of her. I think that, that's important, especially for women to learn. But I also wonder how much it contributed to Whoopi's isolation. Mm-hmm. She was in relationships. Obviously, she's been married a handful of times, but they never made much of an impact on her. I don't think there was really that much emotional connection with any other person besides her family. And I wonder how much it had to do with being told, like, you can never trust anybody ever.
Yeah, because her brother never got into a serious relationship. They were just such a family unit that it couldn't even be broken well into their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
She is not nearly as close to her own daughter as she was to her mother.
Yeah.
Like, even other family couldn't crack the bond that those three had. And it's interesting because it's clear what they had to survive, and it's clear like why they were so tight-knit and how lucky they were that they had each other to love and support. But like there's never really like a delve into that. Like, what does it do to a person to have your mom suddenly disappear for 2 years and come back with no memories of who you are? She's just like, what a weird 2 years. She acts like it was like an ankle sprain, and like a kid didn't come to soccer practice for a couple months because they sprained their ankle, and then eventually they come back and you rehab it and you move on.
That happening sounds horrifying.
Yeah.
And devastating in so many ways. Like, my family had some medical stuff when I was younger, and I would still like see them all the time, but it just like was hard to not have everybody in the same house for like a couple months, like really not a long period of time. So to have that happen and no one telling you what's going on, to not have any contact, to not be able to see anyone, I mean, that's terrifying.
And then to have this person that you don't recognize in your home as your mother.
And then 40 years later, that is another trauma that I don't think should be dismissed. 40 years later to find out what actually happened, that's devastating. This woman that is the most important person in your life, to think about what she went through. Have you ever read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks?
No.
It's really good.
I know they like stole her DNA, right? They like invented DNA from her.
I mean, it's just about the way Black people don't trust the medical industry for really good reasons.
Yeah.
Because they, first of all, used to be experimented on. Second of all, once they like weren't really being experimented on anymore, still certain things were taken without consent. Like, this woman went in for a procedure and some of her uterine cells were scraped out for like tests. But then they turned out to be these incredibly regenerating cells, and they just weren't really sure why. But a lot of major medical advances are because access to these cells existed, and they had this like replenishing fountain of cells that they could experiment and develop with. And her family never saw a dime from it because it...
Like, she never even found out that it was her kind of thing?
No, I think she died before anyone even knew about it. And then when this woman writing this book parallels between the actual story of the Locke cells or whatever they're called, and this woman trying to research the family and everything about Henrietta, because her family is, first of all, very poor because they never saw any money from the fact that
like billions and trillions of dollars of medical breakthroughs have been made on her body.
Exactly. And then also the fact that they're hard to find because they're just like kind of off the grid in like this very different world. And then also they are extremely distrusting of like white people and anyone in this type of professional setting, talking about medicine, talking about doctors, whatever, because of the way the medical industry, like, first of all, like tortured Black people and then also fucked them specifically.
Yeah. I can't imagine going on with life after something that horrible happens to you. 2 years, that's so much time to be tortured.
Yeah.
By people claiming to help you and with your like mental health.
With no access to like your family and everything you've known. I guess like in one hand, maybe the memories were zapped out of her head, but then also undergoing that and just being alone in a mental hospital with no one you've ever known visiting you, like maybe as a defense mechanism, you just convince yourself that your life never happened.
Yeah, what they were telling her, like the gaslighting going on.
Yeah.
Also the way that like her mom, not that I think this is a negative quality at all, I admire that her mom doesn't really talk shit about anybody. But it's very briefly acknowledged that, you know, she was driven to a nervous breakdown because nobody in the fucking family was helping her. And then they turn around and they almost kill her. I think you're like allowed to be a little bit pissed. And it doesn't seem like there was a lot of acknowledgement that that might like make you really mad.
I think there's such a difference between shit talking. And it's so interesting because her mom is also very into calling people out. Like her mom
She's very direct. She'll say it to your face.
Yeah. She'll just say, like, this is something you're doing that's annoying.
She'll say, I don't like your cake. So because their mother worked night shifts, they did have like the party apartment. The kids would come hang out. They got in trouble because of it. I think this is Whoopi's subtle way of being like, you know, it wasn't all ice capades and Rockettes my whole life. We became teenagers and we acted up. But it seems to blow over until, you know, of course, she drops out of school after 8th grade.
Yeah, she does drop out of school and then say that she had a brief problem with drugs and then married her drug counselor. But that is
2 paragraphs max.
This book is full of very interesting interludes on death and legacy. She reflects on the topic of like, do you remember where you were when so-and-so died? And like, which are the first major deaths she remembers? Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy.
She spends more time talking about where she was on JFK's death than she does talking about her drug problem.
Yeah.
She did not have a concrete understanding of racism, really, because she grew up in such a diverse neighborhood. And she said she would see things on TV about like the civil rights movement in the South and be like, why is that happening? What do you mean segregation? What do you mean people can't vote? And her mother also had a way of kind of denying what was happening for Whoopi's own protection to like not stifle her sense of self or her own dreams. And when she would say, how come Black people in TV and on movies are always maids and stuff, she would say, that's just some people's ideas, but there were lots of Black doctors and scientists and kings and queens and stuff. This is a movie, she'd answer, it's not historical. We were a lot of things, and this is the way some people want to tell their stories. She went on to explain that there were many stories we have not heard about the scientists, the doctors, the botanists. She believed in perseverance and moving forward, not standing still. I know I asked her if these things ever happened to her, and in her very Emma way, this is what she said. Listen, there are going to be terrible things that happen in this world, and there's nothing you can do about them. They are what they are. But your decision is going to have to be, do I allow these bad things to stunt my growth as a human being? Am I going to just sit down and die over it? Or am I going to try to figure out how to be better? Which one do you think is a waste of time? My mother didn't have time to waste time. She had to figure out how to get by and get us raised, and she never answered the question.
So then her mom, later in life, became like a preschool assistant teacher. And then they saw how effectively she worked with like young learners, because she was just so like patient and understanding.
And open to children learning differently and being themselves. She was a big believer that like every child's an individual and a unique, and we need to treat them with respect.
Yeah. So then they send her to college, to Hunter College, to get a degree in early education. And then she eventually went on to get her master's. She was this amazing teacher that Whoopi would get letters from all of these people for years saying, you know, your mom opened up my mind and changed my life. She taught children in like a very unique and effective way. She taught them about death to like show them that death isn't scary. She like let pumpkins rot and would say, you can be sad, but you need not be afraid. It's just like the natural order of life.
She talks about how Whoopi speaks like her mom, and she says people often say that, oh, you don't sound Black, you sound white. And when she would talk to her mom about it, she'd go, that's not my problem. They just don't know people like me. They haven't met enough people in their lives, and you can't hate people for their ignorance. They just don't know. Whoopi goes, I would still feel annoyed that I had to deal with it. You have to try to be a little more understanding of their ignorance. You can spend the whole time being pissed off at their inabilities, or just help them understand how it all works and why they shouldn't talk to you in that manner. My mother felt that getting angry was not going to help. She was right, it turns out.
And she goes on to talk about seeing Nichelle Nichols in Star Trek and how crucial it was for her to see a Black person in a show about the future to say, oh, in the future, everyone is just hanging out on the Enterprise.
So then later when they reboot Star Trek, she calls the creator, Gene Roddenberry, and says, I would like a part in this TV show. It's important for me to play a role. And when he says why, she goes, listen, this was the first time I ever saw a Black person in space. It showed me that like we were in the future too. And there had never been a Black person in sci-fi before. And he goes, that's not true. And then he looks through the tapes and he goes, oh my God, not until and almost not since has there been a Black person in these sci-fi movies. And he goes, I didn't realize how lacking in diversity was. He goes, I'm going to build you your entire own character. It's so important that you be in this TV show. And she goes, see, it's important to like understand that not everyone's trying to be evil. If you're used to seeing yourself on TV, you don't realize how much is lacking.
Yeah. She pays a lot of tribute in this book to the Black actors and filmmakers who came before her. And it's very important for her to carry on their legacy. She talks a lot about her personal style and how important it was for her mom to just kind of let her figure herself out. She was just experimenting a lot with like hippie style. And then now later in life, she really just kind of likes wearing a white button down because she doesn't like having to think about things.
Yeah, she says it's comfortable, but polished.
She really talks a lot about the conversations and the politics around Black hair and like what it took for her to decide what she wanted to do and like how she wanted to portray herself. And like she really had to stand her ground maintaining her locks because a lot of producers, a lot of people in Hollywood like didn't understand what she was going for and like why.
And anytime her mom was kind of taken off guard by her new like hippie look, she would quiet herself and say, you get to look however you want to look. Her big belief was you get to make the choice, but then you have to live with the consequences. So she's like, if you're choosing to look this way, go for it. So when she was in 8th grade, she goes to her mom and says, listen, school's just not for me. And her mom goes, you're right. And she says, I want to drop out. And her mom says, well, here's what we're going to do. Here's the deal I'm going to make with you. If you continue your education outside of the classroom, I won't make you go back to school. So every Sunday they would go through the paper and look up lectures and exhibits and things for Whoopi to go to like learn more about the world and educate herself that weren't necessarily classroom studying. And she did that and she hung out and she was a teen.
So now we're finally going to talk about Whoopi Goldberg's career. I bet you're wondering, how have we gotten to this point and not really heard anything other than she took acting classes after dropping out of high school? We haven't heard anything other than that about her career. And at this point, she is an EGOT at time of writing this book. This is a new book.
So growing up, she's like, I loved horror movies. I've always wanted to play a monster. But she loved all movies. They watched a ton of movies growing up. She's a big movie buff.
She started getting on stage when she was 8 years old at the Hudson Guild Theatre in Chelsea, where they would let her do like children's theater productions. And then they had adult productions that kids got to audition for if there was like child roles.
She auditioned for a play on Broadway being directed by Vinette Carroll, the first Black woman to direct something on Broadway. And she actually booked it. And then the very next day she got a call and Vinette was like, sorry, we actually found somebody better.
So now she's auditioning a bit more. She's like going to a lot of things around New York.
She casually mentions that she like gets into drugs at this point.
From the time I left high school, I only wanted to act, but I had no idea what steps I had to take to make that a job. Nobody gave me any information on how to break through into a career, so I would just audition for parts when available. At around age 16, I became dependent on drugs to make me feel good. It's no secret how that kind of shit ends. So then she realizes that she just does not want to be a person whose life revolves around drugs. So she goes to rehab.
Can I read the whole paragraph? Because you guys need to know how much time and space she dedicates to this period of her life. I got into drug rehab and that got me my first marriage. At age 18, I married my drug counselor. He was a great guy and getting married made sense to me at the time, even though I remember my mom asking me, are you sure this is something you want to do? You know, I was young and I thought I was doing what was expected of me. Besides, I'd already agreed to it. A year later, my mom was dropping me off at the hospital to give birth to my daughter.
I didn't even realize she had a daughter.
I think her daughter would agree with you.
She's 18 years old. She's been auditioning. She's now 19, married with a baby. She starts doing theater and she meets a handful of other actors. And she, in this time, realizes she doesn't really see this marriage going anywhere. I liked my husband, but the till death do us part thing didn't seem like it would happen. I thought he understood I'd always want to act or perform. He didn't. So she moves back into her mom's house, and then some of the actors she knows are going to be driving across the country to California.
And they're like, I have a son about your daughter's age. Why don't you just move in with me as the nanny? And then that way you can like come with us for free to California.
So she does. They get to California. It turns out they meant San Diego, not LA. So she's living in San Diego for a while and joins a theater company.
The San Diego Repertory Theater, which ends up becoming very prominent. But in 1977, we did shows wherever space was available.
So she's living out in California with her daughter. She ends up going on welfare for a little bit, and she's very afraid to tell her mom because her mom was very resistant to welfare.
They refused to ever be on it no matter how tough times got.
But her mom said, stop thinking about what I'm thinking. It's what you have to do. You have a kid to take care of, so you'll do what you need to do.
When she moved out to California, her mom goes, it's your choice, but just know if you go out there and don't like it, I have no money to bring you back. And she's like, well, once you decided to go, I knew that you'd have to figure it out because there's no other way.
She decides to come up with a theater name, like a stage name. That's the word. They call it a stage name. Karen Johnson wasn't really causing a splash, so she changes her name to Whoopi because she sometimes would fart.
Who among us? Stars, they're just like us.
And making Whoopi.
That's not a fart. That sucks.
Letting Whoopies loose. Who says Whoopi for fart?
Like a whoopee cushion.
So her name was Whoopi Cushione.
Which was a cushion in
She
French.
said, I added Cushione to it with a French pronunciation. What could that possibly mean?
Her mom reads a review of a play she's in that calls her Whoopi Cushione. And her mom goes, what the fuck is this? And she goes, you need like a sturdier name. So she goes, let's pick one of the names from the family tree. How about Goldberg? That has a nice ring to it.
And that became her name. That's how Whoopi Goldberg was born. If it hadn't been for Emma Johnson, we would be reading Whoopi Cushione's memoir right now. I left San Diego as Karen Johnson and arrived in Berkeley as Whoopi Goldberg. So in Berkeley, she's doing a lot of creative improvisation. And at the Blake Street Theater in Berkeley, she starts developing these characters and performing this show that starts to make a really big splash. She starts doing a solo show called The Spook Show because you never know which characters might appear in the show. People would start showing up to see me on stage, and I was having a good time. Alice Walker, the writer of The Color Purple, came to see the show. Some really prominent people come and see this show.
The National Endowment for the Arts was becoming more supportive of experimental stuff, and soon I got a letter from the artistic director of the Dance Theater Workshop in New York, David White. He wrote that they were doing a series of one-person shows. He had my show highly recommended to him by a colleague who saw it, so he invited me to do the series in New York City. So she gets there, and at first she's only doing it for a couple people here and there, but pretty soon more stars start coming, and then the New York Times reviewer comes and gives it a rave review, and then it is like the talk of the fucking town, sold out every night, huge celebrities.
Okay, so now I want you to think really quick about what characters you think Whoopi Goldberg, nay Cushione, was performing on the Spook Show.
Hold on. Can I preface it with this? So one of the people that comes to see her is Mike Nichols. She cannot believe it. He comes to see her after the show and is like, that was incredible. You have no idea how much that meant to me. I have to let you know. And then he starts talking about the fact that he escaped the Holocaust by leaving Germany in 1939. And he says, because of that, your show really spoke to me. Okay, here are the characters that really tore up Mike Nichols.
The first character I did was a drug addict named Fontaine who goes to Amsterdam. He sees Anne Frank's hiding place and her quote about how she believed in the goodness of people despite everything. He sees Shelley Winter's Oscar that she donated to the museum. It all becomes very real to Fontaine and it changes him.
Okay, so that's one. I guess I heard improv. She had improvised these characters. That felt serious.
Her name was Farts.
Farts in French. What other characters do you think she was doing? I'll tell you. Quite a few characters in the show tore Mike up, like the 13-year-old who has to do a coat hanger abortion on herself after her family kicks her out, and the disabled woman trapped in a wheelchair who sleeps and dreams she is a dancer. Okay. Obviously, Whoopi Goldberg not only is infinitely more talented than I could even dream of being, she is like the talent that attracts like, are these not a bit heavy-handed? Could you imagine going to see 10 characters by a woman named Holocaust, abortion for children, disabled
like
dancing.
Finding hope amidst fascism.
Oh, I just was like, God, what else were they, Whoopi? These are a bit fucking heavy-handed.
Okay, so Mike Nichols loves the show. He can't believe it. He wants to produce it for Broadway. And she goes back.
Oh, by the way, if you're wondering where her daughter is, because she moved back home and lived with her mom while she was doing the show on Broadway.
Or while she was doing this show for like the festival.
Yeah, her daughter was not invited. Her daughter stayed in Berkeley with her then boyfriend. Not the daughter's boyfriend, Whoopi's.
Whoopi's boyfriend was watching the daughter in Berkeley. And Whoopi was in New York for, I think, 5 weeks doing this run of shows. And then she goes back to Berkeley. And then Mike Nichols calls her and was like, all right, we're going to do the Lyceum Theater. And she goes back to New York. Her daughter stays in Berkeley.
And it's only until after this run of show, which becomes hugely successful, that he's like, hey, I think we should probably break up and I can't watch your daughter forever.
Yeah. Before Mike Nichols chose me, very few people knew my name. So count me lucky from the get-go. She's talking about all the famous people who randomly came to see this show, were a part of her experience. The white-haired man at rehearsals ended up being a famous cartoonist who drew her.
It was Jack Nicholson, Calvin Klein, Liza Minnelli.
Diana Ross sent her flowers on opening night.
Ruth Gordon, Minnie Castevet, just like everyone famous she'd ever hoped to meet. Every time he'd go out to lunch, he'd be like, oh, come, I'm meeting up with my boy Steve. And it'd be like Steve Martin. And she, at this point, had been with an improv troupe 1 year earlier.
Yeah.
It becomes a huge hit. She does 156 shows. And her mom is with her every step of the way. And everything she can include her mom in, she does. Mike Nichols loves her mom.
Everybody loves her mom.
She invites her mom to all these lunches with all these famous people, and they get a real kick out of it.
After the show, she is going to move out to LA, and she asks her mom, she's like, okay, so my boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend, isn't going to just watch my daughter forever. And I don't know what I'm going to do because I feel like my career is really taking off. And so she asks her mom if she would potentially quit her job at the school and move out to LA to be with her. And her mom was like, hell yeah, I'm going to bring one bag of things. And she burns her key.
Yeah, she shows up in LA with 2 shopping bags and she goes, I incinerated my key. I left everything I don't need. And Whoopi's kind of like, well, what about my stuff? What about my birth certificate? What about, you don't want anything? And she kept going, I said what I said.
Yeah, she's like, but what about those Beatles albums? First run Beatles records.
That was it. There was all that was to be said about it. She never returned to the projects and I have no idea where anything from our old apartment went. I keep waiting for my birth certificate to pop up in a tabloid magazine one day. Years and years later, after she told me the secret about her memory loss at Bellevue, it made sense. The move to California was probably the first time she had felt safe. Nobody was going to show up and take her back to Bellevue. I got it. She wanted to be free. It became clear to me.
So then she gets her role in The Color Purple.
She auditions for a year and then it turns out Steven Spielberg had wanted her for the part of Celie the whole time.
Steven gives her really good advice on set because she's scared she won't be able to live up to the lead role in this very prominent production. And she says, what if I suck? And he says, well, you've sucked before, haven't you? And she says, well, yeah. And he goes, well, you'll just suck again and I'll do my best to keep that from happening. You've sucked before, but you didn't suck every day, right? I feel like that's really good advice to be like, I don't know, some people flop sometimes.
Everybody flops sometimes.
But what, are you always flopping?
Me? Yes. But not Whoopi Goldberg.
Not Whoopi.
Flopping or farting.
So she finishes The Color Purple. It turns out she doesn't flop because she gets nominated for an Oscar. It's her first movie. She ends up not winning, but she really could have.
She was happy she didn't win. She was happy that Geraldine Page won because it was her first ever Oscar and then she died the next year. She said she felt like it was a win for her. She goes, she's a New York actor. I'm a New York actor. That was good enough for me.
She talks about being confident, auditioning and moving into this new space. I'll read what she says first. I got my confidence because I knew what I was capable of doing. I would call Mike if I was in doubt about what I could do. He always had me in his sights. I stopped listening to other people who gave me a list of reasons why I couldn't do certain roles. I knew that those people didn't know anything about me or what I might be capable of. I mean, that's such a good attitude to have. And I feel like it also helps that after one run of a solo show, she ended up with a Broadway smash hit.
And then an Oscar nom.
I
knew that my daughter was going to be really angry at me and maybe for a long time. Kids want their moms. They want their moms to be around to take care of everything they don't know how to handle yet. They want their moms' full attention whenever they need it. They want their moms to be home when they go to bed and be there when they wake up. That's how it goes.
And boy, was her kid angry with her.
As an adult, Alex remembers me explaining to her as a child why I often had to be away. She gets it now. But as a kid, you're not thinking about financial independence, security, or having some backup in the bank account. When you're 8 or 9, you just want your mom around.
She talks about working so much when Alex was young, and she goes, here's the deal. A regular mom might have said, yeah, I'd like to play a role in your movie or my solo show in Vegas or do a TV series, but I'm a mom. In 10 or 12 years when my kid is grown, I'll check back with you. It doesn't happen like that. That's the hard thing is that's obviously nonsense. The industry does move so fast, and if you are fresh off of a Broadway smash success and an Oscar nomination, you don't really have time to patter around.
So her mom kind of takes over rearing her daughter, Alex, and Whoopi goes out to pursue her career. Unfortunately, however, she is now coming up against the barrier for many Black actors, which is that there are not that many roles available to them, and that people have this belief that like a Black actor can only play a very specifically Black character.
Yeah.
And she's trying to explain to them like, no, I could be anything because I've felt the range of emotion.
That's what acting is. You play a character that's different than you. And she ends up kind of getting through to people, it seems. She really will put herself out there for roles that are not looking to cast a Black actress. And sometimes it works. Most of the movie roles I played in the 80s and 90s were intended for other people.
My lead role in Burglar in 1987 was supposed to be for Bruce Willis. I mean, that is going against typecasting, I guess.
Yeah. Jumpin' Jack Flash was written for Shelley Long.
She got Fatal Beauty, which was specifically for Cher. And Sister Act was supposed to be for Bette Midler.
Some of these movies are doing well, but some of them are not. And I do think the success in her taking these roles is that a lot of them were not meant for a Black actress. But, you know, the media is not being kind to her. I started hearing the press say stuff like she's not living up to her Oscar potential. People seemed to feel like I was disappointing them. For about 10 minutes, I took it to heart.
And then, of course, her mom goes, if it's about the money, then, you know, you probably will disappoint people all the time because you can't always get films like The Color Purple. Nobody does. You're a working actor. I don't see what the issue is because you're a character actor working as a lead actor.
Okay, so then she's addicted to drugs again.
She was partying in Hollywood, and the problem is she never says what she was addicted to originally. I'm guessing it was heroin.
Oh, when she was a teenager?
Yeah, because then here she goes, it wasn't my drug of choice, so I figured it was cool to do lines of cocaine and Quaaludes. It was a really good time for about a year. Then I fell into a deep well of cocaine and sank to a new low. And she claims at first for like a full year, she was a very high functioning cocaine addict, where she was like, I knew that if I fucked up, nobody got paid. So I did my best out of respect for the crew. And then she has this moment where she's like hiding in the closet of her own hotel room,
like hallucinating
and doing drugs. And when she jumps out, well, she doesn't jump out, but she like walks out covered in cocaine, and the housekeeper's in there and thought she was alone. And they both are like screaming and freaking out. And she's like, dang, I got to get a grip on this.
She says, I would have been so embarrassed if my mother knew the extent that coke had me in its clutches. It's not like she didn't have recreational drug habits she enjoyed. She was a smoker most of her life and wasn't opposed to smoking some weed. But she just didn't want to disappoint her family like this, especially because at this point, she's now spent years of her daughter's life not present while her mom kind of takes over parenting. And I think she was so humiliated by the idea that she would fail in Hollywood after asking that of the people in her life.
She said, is this the version of yourself you're okay showing your daughter? What the fuck are you doing? Get up and get out and fix your life. You've been sitting in a closet for 2 days. It's not good at all. Again, I am the luckiest woman in the world. I was able to stop using drugs quickly. Not everyone can. I know a lot of people who have different brains and they can't decide to quit. It's not a choice for them.
My mom's lifelong belief in me turned into my mantra. I can do anything I want if I put my mind to it. So she gets back out there. She's doing a lot of work. And then the role of Oda Mae in Ghost pops up. And the writer of that movie does not want Whoopi Goldberg. So she's just not even allowed to read for it. And she's like, why is every
woman of color in Hollywood allowed to but me?
And they're like, the writer just doesn't want you. And then Patrick Swayze gets cast in the movie. And he's like, why did Whoopi Goldberg turn this movie down? And they're like, oh, she hasn't even auditioned. And he was like, what the fuck? And then the director was like, yeah, where the fuck is Whoopi Goldberg? So finally they go out. She auditions and does like a chemistry read with Patrick Swayze. And of course, it's fucking her. I watched that movie recently after we covered Demi Moore's book again. I think I said this on the Patreon. My number one takeaway from that movie was that Whoopi Goldberg was incredible.
I have to rewatch it. I don't know that I've ever actually watched it all the way through.
It's really interesting. Like, it's an odd movie, but like Demi Moore is beautiful. It knocks you off your feet a little bit. You're like, oh,
that's
okay.
So interesting.
Patrick Swayze is good, but I don't feel like he really made an impression on me other than the fact that like his legacy is so massive. And Whoopi Goldberg, I was like blown out of the fucking water.
I have to watch. I'll watch for the Patreon.
It's like shitty effects. And so like her acting is so crucial.
Then she just talks about her love of Elizabeth Taylor and how kind Elizabeth was to her and how much she admires that Elizabeth Taylor was doing charity work for AIDS back before anybody else would touch it. And E.T., as she calls her, really taught her how to like use your platform for good and ask for what you're worth and the power of having this kind of audience.
And then she wins an Oscar for Ghost.
And she becomes BFFs with all the people who lost around her.
Yeah, she says all of the women who were nominated in her category agreed that no matter what happens, all 5 of them would go have like a nice lunch and the winner would pay for everything. And so she wins an Oscar, but like they all have a really great lunch after.
And now she gets into the concept of having it all. I say you can have it all, but you've got to walk away from the idea that it's going to look like some movie. Having it all is as messy as you can get. You're going to have consequences for your choices. Not everybody's going to think you've got it together. That's the hard part of that kind of goal. You're going to spend your life trying to figure it out. There are going to be really great times when you feel like what you do matters. And then there will be times you have to accept that you aren't all that and you have to rely on other people for help. Like I did with my mother when I asked for her help raising my daughter.
Some would argue that's actually not having it all then.
Yeah.
For her to be like, you can have it all, you just can't have some of the things.
She goes, yeah, I would never win a mother award. Alex now knows why it was the way it was, especially since she's raised 3 kids of her own. Because having it all is fucking messy. You've got to own it. Then she concludes by being like, a lot of actors have come up to me and said that I changed their lives with my performances. So it's kind of cool to know that I raised that generation.
Yeah. And then she opens the next chapter by talking about how Alex had a kid.
At 15.
So Whoopi Goldberg was 34 years old and she became a grandmother. And Alex called her and said, I want to have this baby. This baby will love me and she won't know you. She says later her and Alex talked about it and Alex was like, I don't know, maybe I just wanted someone in the world who didn't know who Whoopi Goldberg was. Like she really felt cast aside by Whoopi's career.
And she said that she was tired of people asking Whoopi for autographs and just looking past Alex and towards Whoopi and all of the distance that Whoopi took to have her career. There was no way to predict what my mother would say or do in any given situation. Her opinions are authentic to her. So basically Whoopi's like, you should have an abortion. And she goes, I'm going to have my kid. And when she calls her mom to go, can you believe it? Her mom goes, oh, that's interesting. I thought you were marching on Washington for a woman's right to choose. I guess you just march for your own right to choose. And she basically goes, listen, we'll help. We have the resources and this is what she wants to do in her life. And sure enough, I will say, you couldn't ask for a better helping hand. Emma was not only a pediatric nurse, she was like a Head Start program master's degree teacher. She knows how to help raise a little baby.
That's so true. And boy, did she help.
Yeah. She was at the hospital with Whoopi's daughter.
Yeah. Well, because Whoopi wasn't allowed to know the baby for a minute.
She also around this time gets her brother to come move up to LA and become her driver. And she goes, basically, here's the deal. She says, I'll take care of you and mom if you take care of mom. I would feel better knowing that someone we love and she loves is having her back because she won't drive and stuff. And then I'll just pay for everything. And that way they all got to hang out. I mean, They were so close.
Because they all did have an important role here. And then it doesn't feel like people are just living with her. It's the mom is taking care of the daughter.
This is what it was all for. And she always says to her daughter, I'm doing this to change my life, your life, my mom's life, and my brother's life. And that is bigger than me doing the normal mom stuff. Can I point out something interesting though?
Yeah.
So they lived in these houses where her mom and daughter lived in the front house and Whoopi lived in a separate house.
That's interesting.
She's like, well, I had to wake up a lot early and get home late because of my jobs. And
what if you thickened the walls a bit?
It's just as crazy to be like, my mom's going to watch you while I'm gone and also when I'm home.
That's tough stuff.
Yeah, she has this crazy experience where Marlon Brando calls up and goes, can I come meet you for lunch on Thursday? And she's like, totally. And then she goes out to pick some flowers, comes back, and he's in her house playing piano. And she's like, I thought we were going to meet up Thursday. And he goes, I had such a great time talking to you. I thought I'd come right over instead. And she's like, oh, okay. When he died, he gave her a piece of the island that he owns. And apparently his family had to call up all the celebrities he gave a piece of the island to be like, hey, could you give it back? Because there's not really much island left.
When her brother passed away, they had 3 memorials in 3 different cities. And in every single city, multiple women came up and were like, we were about to move in together. And she's like, oh, we were the same. We never really settled down.
And then it concludes.
She talks a little bit about mental health and is like, I've never been depressed, but I did feel really bad.
She says there's a big difference between what happened to her brother when her mom died and what happened to her. She says, I didn't know anything about feeling lost until after she died. I wouldn't call it crippling grief because it doesn't have a grip on me. It's more of a grief that is way down to my toes. It doesn't feel dark. It's kind of fog or numbness. But she says, Clyde couldn't ever move on. When their mother died, it crippled him.
I think that this was a really beautiful passage on grief because it is something that it's so hard to put your finger on. She says, it doesn't feel dark. It's kind of a fog or a numbness. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to feel now. I'm not raving angry, but I resent the fact that my mom and Clyde aren't here anymore. It's not like either one could have done anything about dying, but from time to time, I feel like, why did y'all leave me here?
I'm not in a rush to go wherever they went, but a lot of days I'm just sort of walking through it, getting where I need to go and doing what I need to do. I had no clue that things would change so dramatically for me once they were gone. Was I so tethered to mom and brother that I can't find my own bearings? It feels that way. They were my home base, my reality check, because they both knew me from the start.
And she talks about the most important lessons that she learned from her mom that she had to apply during this time. Get off the bed, get up and do something meaningful. Like when you are feeling some type of way, just like do your best to be kind to people, even when you're not feeling it. Like it just comes back to like moving forward.
She says she really tries to help her friends who go through a similar loss right now. Whenever someone loses their mom, she like writes to them and says, here's what's helped me. Just know that nobody who hasn't gone through this will understand you. And you don't have to be mad at them, but you can shut down the conversation quickly. She says when you go through your parents' stuff, try to bring all the siblings at once or a friend because it can be really brutal to do it by yourself and give yourself grace. Some days the tears are going to come and you just have to let that be. They might not be convenient or they might show up unexpectedly. If you go into a funk, then really let yourself go fully into it. Pull up a fainting chair, draw the curtains, close out the world for a while and get as insane in your grief as you ever thought you could. Get into an insanity funk all over the house. Let it out. It will help you get up faster and back to life.
Most of us don't have to face or think about death all that much. Well, let me tell you when you don't want to have to figure it out after a person has died. So she says, like, talk about death. Like, talk about what you want. Talk about your hopes and your dreams and things because you don't want to leave things unsaid. It's really hard to reconcile with that once you can't say it.
She says she's just lonely, even though she has so many people in her life, but it's not the same. She has her daughter and her daughter's family, but she goes, I'm lonely for those who knew me from my first breath, my mother and my brother.
I mean, she really gives like a timeline prescription of like how to go through and process and get rid of like physical items. I do think this last chapter like is very interesting if you're dealing with like this type of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks again about like never leaving things unsaid. And she goes, I never had to wonder if she was happy. Nothing was left unsaid between Mom, Clyde, and me.
I know my mission to give back to her everything she had given me had happened while she was alive. I always wanted her to know that she was the best mother for me. She not only gave birth to me, but she gave life to my outlook, my confidence, my dream. Every November 13th, my birthday, I would have flowers sent to my mother with a card that read, thanks for letting me rent the room.
I think my new mission is to be more appreciative of my days like my mom, because there's no doubt I'm the luckiest person in the world.
Oh my God, we didn't even mention that she got married 2 other times.
Neither did she really.
Yeah, sorry. It was like 2 pages, like not 2 pages. It was like a sentence
paragraph
about each. She was like, I got married to this guy. It didn't work out. And I got married to another guy. And my mom's like, just have parties. And then she's like, now I appreciate a hit it and quit it situation.
I mean, Whoopi is a very interesting lady.
I would love a biography of Whoopi. I would love a biography of her mom.
Yeah. But who has the information?
No one.
So, interesting stuff. How many worm teenies would you have with Whoopi Goldberg?
40.
Yeah, me too. I'd black the foik out. I'd be like, I don't know, just tell me something else.
Yeah, I would love, oh my God. I just want to be, yeah.
The Whoopi Goldberg Book of Mantras, por favor.
And then how fertile would you say the soil is?
I would say it's deeply uneven. I think you couldn't plant a field of crops in this soil. You could plant a couple of flowers, and I think certain patches are like 1s and certain patches are like 9s.
Yeah, I'm giving it a 3.
Okay.
A 3 out of 5. How many worm teenies do you want to have with the names of the people we thank the most?
A million worm teenies for our 5-star reviewing wormies.
And you guys, if you miss it up top, we are so excited to see you on tour. We are coming to Toronto, Philly, Chicago, New York City, DC, San Francisco, Dublin, London, and not less and not more, those. And those are them. Those are the cities we're going to in a March Madness style bracket tournament where we are pitting memoirist against memoirist. Tickets are on sale right now for our Patreon subscribers, but go on sale to the Gen Pop. That's the rest of you suckers. February 6th.
Love you.